So I'd say that's the first part of the culture that I think excites a lot of the people that come to work here. Also, we have a culture of helping each other. Right? There is no perfection. My former boss at HPE, Dan Belanger, would say it all the time. There's no perfection. We're all humans, right? But we have to help each other, and I think that's the signature of our company is helping each other. And then lastly, we're not a startup that's just driving only for evaluation. We're building a sustainable company. We want to have a sustainable company that's profitable, that throws off profit, that drives growth organically through partnerships, through targeted acquisitions, as we just expressed last week. So we've got a culture that's on the move. That's one that we're building with the idea in mind and the financial engineering and discipline from our CFO, Marion Smith, that we can build a sustainable long-term business that's healthy. So I would say those three things are the top things about the culture that any good sales guy would want to have behind them coming to a new company.
Awesome. Really cool. And just a reminder, so thanks for Kevin for asking the question. For those just joining, we have Steve Hirsch, CRO of Virtana on, and feel free to make any comments or ask any questions. So getting into our title topic, which is best practices for sales and business presentations. Why is it important?
Well, so, I think today, Randy, customers are swarmed by salespeople who don't put in the time, energy, or effort to really understand the business of the customer's business. And then, when you don't understand the business of the customer's business, you get relegated to gatekeepers and to evaluators and to folks that want to sort of put you into a box or a position. One of the sales trainers I worked with many years ago wrote a book called Beyond Selling Value, and he talks about the vendor trap. Okay, and the vendor trap is a place that's really hard to fight your way out of. And so I think business presentations are important, not just for closing deals, right, but across the sales cycle, because it forces you to do research that most likely your competitors are not doing, and not just research like library-based academic research, but really getting under the financials and collecting data, doing research calls with customers to understand what the care-abouts are of the senior decision makers, doing research about, not just the formal work, how things are supposed to work, but the informal work, right? How things actually work. And then what happens after work, right? Those networks, like if anybody wanted to make a call on some of the people that you're calling on, they probably should know who you went to the Super Bowl with or who you went to the Masters with, because likely those relationships are pretty cemented. So what it does is it gives you an opportunity to bring forward a very insightful, polished, and powerful business value proposition so that you can position your company as a strategic resource to a customer or prospect, either expanding or selling in the new, versus a vendor that gets stuck in a vendor trap and is always fighting to try and sell value based upon price.
Totally. And then how do you think about when you're kind of doing the presentations, who you present to? How does that come into play? So,
listen, it really depends upon what your objective of the presentation is, right? Many times across my career, when I've presented to a senior level person just to prove the business fit of our company before I investigated the time or energy in trying to sell my product fit, right? So if you're presenting to just really establish fit and get a seat at the adults table, if you will, it might be different than if you're presenting to close a deal where you really want to make sure that you have that senior level executive decision maker in the room. And so, when I think about decision makers, a lot of people have this debate about, do committees make decisions in large organizations or is it people? In my experience, there's generally a single decision maker in every one of the opportunities we're all working on. And he's the guy or the gal that can say yes when everybody else says no. And he's the guy or the gal that can say no when everybody else says yes. And I think it's important, especially if you're trying to advance the ball on an existing account or to close a deal, that you get in front of that person, you prove the business fit before you prove the product or technology fit, and you present. And I'll say this, Randy, and I tell this to my team all the time. The power of presentation trumps a chat or a discussion every time. Every time.
Absolutely. Well, done right, a presentation really also is a discussion, correct? So it's kind
it is a discussion, but I'm saying, you know what, many times I've had reps say, hey, we're going to go meet with the senior executive. We're trying to gain a commitment to take an order down, and we're going to go have a chat, right? In my mind, I think it's very important to go in a more structured approach, set up the fact that you want to deliver a business presentation, do the research ahead of time, test your presentation with your coaches and your champions in the account. And then when you get the opportunity to present, it's a serious business presentation where you're articulating the business fit before the technology fit, and then you can lead into the solution fit once you've proven that.
Absolutely. And then what other things do you think about in terms of that preparation? You've already touched on a couple things.
Yeah, I think it's important that, again, going back to the org chart, to really understand the difference between how things are supposed to work organizationally and then how things actually work, right? And so, you may call on people that have high title but low influence within an organization. Conversely, low title but high influence within an organization. So once you understand the levels of influence, you can set your guns on making sure you present to the right person. And generally, there are others, hopefully your coaches in the room when you make those presentations. But part of the preparation is doing the research. It's making sure you do the basics, looking at the company's competitors, the business of their business, how their business is doing, what the macroeconomic environment looks like, what their challenges are. You ask your coaches and other adjacent people in the organization what the primary care abouts are of the individual that you believe is the decision maker that you're presenting to. And then you use your time to chart all that out with the end game in mind, right? And present a powerful business presentation that sells the customer first on your business fit, then on your solution fit. And then, of course, going forward to these presentations with the end in mind, you have to have a very, very firm action table that sort of gets you from where you are and where you want to be at the end of that presentation to what those next steps are.
Absolutely. So you mentioned coaches a lot of times, but the ideal thing, easier said than done, but the ideal thing is you kind of have everybody thinking they're your coach. You're able to kind of tie off with them beforehand, and then That's right. know that they're positive, they're going to be supportive. So whether you're a CEO at the biggest companies who he would never go into a board meeting, just something completely surprised, right? They want to kind of, and obviously if you're a CEO, it's easier to get with your board members, beforehand, but kind of I'd say similar analogy for any of these sales calls. And then if you can't get with anybody, leveraging those internal coaches to really be your, support. You could even stage a couple of questions to say, hey, when I get to this point, ask about this, ask about that, just to create engagement, involvement in getting feedback, correct?
Yeah, listen, there are ways to get, you have gatekeepers in these accounts whose job, like procurement people, are to keep you away from the decision makers, right? That's their role. That's their nature, right? However, you can still interview those people. I've many a times in my career, I've set up a meeting with an individual who was a gatekeeper or an evaluator and said, hey, this isn't a sales call. I'm getting ready to do a presentation next week, and I just want to do some research to make sure that the things that I discuss and the items that I talk about hit the mark with this decision maker. And more times than not, if you show them your draft, even though you don't have to show them the entire draft of your presentation, and you take their feedback, they're going to tell you a lot more and help you steer, towards the target, so that when you deliver that presentation, it creates a lot of impact.
Totally. And then, how do you think about kind of internal and external communications?
Yeah, so I think external communications are really useful by interviewing people that used to work at the particular enterprise that you're calling on and have current relationships with executives and kind of know how they think, right? It's also important to test your presentation before you go in, because just like sports, I know both your kids are high performance athletes. If you don't practice, you show up cold, you're likely not going to be successful. And so you test those presentations with your internal coaches, with folks externally that may have worked there before that can give you some insights, right? I'm doing that today, right now, with a person that used to work at Dell that has a lot of great insight. And then I think the most critical folks that you want to test your presentation with are going to be your team, your colleagues, and your manager. And it's okay, when you're rehearsing this thing, to take this to your team and your colleagues and say, look, I'm going in next week to deliver this presentation. I want to test it with you and then get your feedback, because that helps you prepare better so that when you show up, you're as polished as you can be. Because I think we've all heard the expression that you never really have a second chance to make a first impression. or at least if you do, it's going to be hard to unwind a bad impression up front, right? I also would tell you that the logistics are critically important, right? Are you going to present on a flip chart in a small conference room? Do you have a conference room where you can project a PowerPoint? Or are you doing handouts, right? Understanding and nailing all those logistics before you go in are important, Randy, because you don't want to fumble the ball when you get the time.
Yeah, and it will, technology-wise, and we used to lie, presenting to CIOs or IT leaders, everything else. I mean, more times than not, there's always something that goes wrong with the tech, right? So it's like, okay, you got to have a backup, even to the degree of kind of having, paper copies if it's a face-to-face, just in case. And if nothing else, they respect that level of preparedness. And if you can do that well and do this well, then they know they should have confidence that you can deliver as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I would say to you that, it's important to bring, leave behind for customers of a presentation when you do an important meeting like the ones that we're talking about. These are high stakes kind of meetings. My advice, though, and I've had this happen before, is to not hand them out until after the presentation. So that way, because bullets without context, right, are not going to really get the message across, because a lot of it's delivery, right? You've done your research. You've had a lot of communications internally and externally, and now's your time to show up. It's about you having confidence, having a rhythm, and delivering. And also tone is important, right? If you're trying to prove business fit, you want to start, and we're doing a presentation tomorrow at Virtana, where the way we're starting the presentation is, hey, we've done all this research, we've done all this work, we appreciate the time. We want to confirm our understanding of your business and what your key priorities are. And the tone there has got to be very, very humble. Right? Because if you come off aggressive, like, hey, we know versus we want to confirm, you're going to send the presentation sideways before you get started. As you progress towards, this is what we believe the business fit to be, this is the solution fit, this is our understanding of some of the other things going on, in your environment from an economic perspective, you can sort of get a little bit more aggressive and lean in. But tone also plays an important part in delivering these presentations.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so you do all the preparation, you get everything ready, do your homework, you get your coaches. Okay, now actual presentation day.
That's right. Well, I mean, you have to do logistics, you have to, get everything ready. But I would say a day or two before you go in, you want to confirm, number one, with whoever helped you set this up, that you do have a conference room, and it's you'll be able to shoot a PowerPoint on the wall or use a flip chart and what the logistics are. You want to send pre-meeting, and you want it to be positioned more as an event than a presentation, because let's just be honest, we've got to have a little bit of empathy for senior executives that we call on, who spend 80-90% of their time in meetings getting presentations done, and they're they're just worn out from it, right? So the idea here is to position your presentation as something that's different, as an event. And generally speaking, when you do a good and a highly effective business presentation or closing presentation to a prospect, when you start to hear comments like, you guys know more about our business than some of the people that work here, or you guys understand our issues better than some of the people in this room, or can we use this presentation to present it to our board or our CEO, or would you be willing to step into one of our meetings to talk about some of these things? You hit the mark and kind of use it to your ears.
Totally. All right. So do the presentation. What about the follow-up?
Well, yeah. So at the end of every presentation, whether it's a business presentation or closing presentation, or just a presentation for you to try and expand your footprint or relationship, you have to have a very, very effective follow-up in an assumptive timetable. Again, working on this today for a presentation that I'm delivering tomorrow. So I've got real-time experience. And it's not good enough to put up a slide that says, hey, what are the next steps, right? What's most appropriate for these kind of situations is that you put up a slide that says, hey, timetable, action steps, the appropriate path forward, or whatever it is. But you've been very, very thoughtful with the end game in mind as to exactly what you want the next steps to be and what you want the decision maker to agree to in that meeting. So it might be, hey, we want to confirm, a demo by a certain date. It might be that we want to do a site survey and come visit your site and do an assessment and some discovery. It might be that you're going to be executing an order by a certain date, and then we're going to have a project kickoff meeting a day or two beyond that. But the way I like to do it, Randy, is I usually like to put the ball in the customer's court, because that's when things get good, and that's when people start to wiggle a little bit. And so I'll generally put something up that says, hey, the most appropriate path forward. And it might say, hey, confirm that we have, the counts right. Gain an order or a PO by a certain date. Have a project kickoff meeting on this date. Go live on this date. And I might say to the customer, hey, Mr. Customer, based upon all the work that we've done, based upon the research that we've done, this is what we believe to be the most appropriate path forward. How do you feel like we should move forward from this point? And I tell everybody on my team that if you answer that question that I asked for the customer, we're going to have an early morning breakfast the next day. So it's important, and it might seem like an hour goes by before you get an answer to those kind of questions about timetables and next steps, but you've got to wait it out and give the customer an opportunity to respond. Because what I find is that you learn when you prepare like that you may have missed the mark in a couple of areas, and there's a couple of areas that the prospect or the customer is not sold on, and you might have to set up another meeting to execute and deliver against those before you can get to some of those key action steps like gaining a commitment and getting an order done.
Awesome. Great words of wisdom there for a bit business sales presentation. So thanks so much for that. So reminder, people watching along or listening, feel free to post any comments or any questions as well. So I know you had some great mentors along the way. Any one or two nuggets in particular for advice that you've received that's stuck with you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that one of the most important items that I've received, and it's from our current board chair, Ron, who you know pretty well, is that we have to pay attention to what's going on in the world around us. If we live in a vacuum and we're not focused on the macroeconomic environment, and innovation that's happening around you, you can get left behind in this industry pretty quickly. So, for example, in our business, we provide really, really good solutions, but we've had a transition the way that we sell those solutions from being reactive to more proactive, right? So reactive is, hey, Rome was burning, the roof was on fire, you're a big airline and you can't fly and take reservations. We're going to come in and help you solve that problem. The new way we're talking about our business based upon this feedback, and it's continuous feedback I get from Ron, is that, hey, there's a cost associated with downtime. You can't afford to have these systems down for an hour, or it could cost you millions of dollars, right? We have the ability to help you with better resource forecasting. We have the ability to help you optimize your infrastructure like storage. We have the ability to help you consolidate your footprint, whether it's SAN switching, network switching, server footprints, that sort of thing. We can help you right-size workloads that you're running on servers to get a better bang for your buck on your enterprise-wide licensing deals, whether it's containers or virtual machines and that kind of thing, right? So I think it's really paying attention to the external factors and the external forces around you, and then applying them to your unique situation.